Oh yeah, hi. Um, she spoke to you last week about what was in your bag. Um, that's the burdens that you lug around with you, not what actually is in your bag today. Um, Now, it was very challenging, but for those of you who missed it, I can highly recommend that you look it up on YouTube. And that's not just because I'm biased. It was a really challenging talk. Well, today I'm speaking to you in my role as Chair of Trustees for Kingfisher, rather than the second part of a Parky family double act. I want to present to you a view as a trustee for the last 15 years and a Chair of Trustees for the last 10 years. I want to present you um, a trustee's vision that ties in with our vision, the church's vision. It follows on from the vision talk that James, our senior pastor, presented last month. It also ties in with the challenges that our pastor, Ollie, has placed before us with, as he mentioned, Into the Stretch Zone last year, and this year with the sermon series of Going Strong and Who Dares Wins. So in the next 25 minutes or so, I want to present a trustee's view about what we, Kingfisher family of churches, that's we, me included, have achieved in 2019. I then want to look forward and present what is God calling Kingfisher to do, not just in 2020, but in the future years, and set out what this means in terms of resources, including finances. Now, I guess it wouldn't be a presentation from me if I didn't end up talking about money, but someone's got to do it, hey-ho. And finally, I want to set a challenge for all of us, me included again, about what we can, that's you, the Kingfisher congregations, can do to support this. So the question is, what can you offer? Now, one of the things that the trustees do each year is to present the annual accounts for the church to the Charities Commission. Now, this is a formal legal document. It's a requirement, but in putting this together, we include a report about what we've achieved in the year. And each year, we're amazed about what has been done across the Kingfisher family. But that amazement and that joy is not shared with others other than within the accounts. So unless you happen to look it up on the Charity Commission website, we kind of miss out on it. So this year, we decided to share it with you because I think we can too often take for granted just how God is using this little old church based in Gloucester. Now, so I'm basically going to present that report as best I can and given time constraint. So at Treadworth, just to remind you, in 2019, every Sunday we deliver 3 services. Our 10 a.m. service, this one, has age-specific groups for children and teens, and the emphasis is on welcoming those who are exploring faith. At our 11 a.m. interactive service, it's for everyone, or anyone, or both, but especially those with additional needs who need a more flexible and sensory approach to worship and teaching. Now, over the last few years, the attendance at that second service has seen rapid growth, with as many as 100 people coming along on occasions. If you haven't attended that service, I really encourage you to come along. It is a truly memorable experience. Overall, on Sunday morning, we welcome close to 200 people into God's house in Treadworth. In the evening, our 6 p.m. service is believer-focused, with an emphasis on worship, testimony, and Bible teaching. Now, I attend this service, and the teaching that James gives is amazing and inspiring. It's a real gem that seems hidden to many because the attendance at that service doesn't reflect the value of the content. Throughout the week, Treadworth Children and Youth Ministries host Toddler and Twins Group, Little Fishies Toddler Group, Fusion Tuesday for primary school age youth, and 180 Friday for secondary school age group youth. We have a seniors social group, Connect group for adults with additional learning needs, Tuesday community coffee morning, Celebrate Recovery group that meets weekly in the building. In addition, there's a dads only group that meets every other Saturday morning, the Engage group, worship group, practice here in an evening, and there's a monthly Saturday morning prayer meeting on a day that Ollie obviously moves around. We also continue to work closely with Kingfisher Treasure Seekers social enterprise. And this building is used to host 3 discos a week and a weekly performing arts workshop for adults with additional needs. So in a typical week, this building is used at least 6 days, and around 1,000 people cross the threshold of this church. I'll just let you think about that whilst I just take a swig. So if we add to this the other things that go on here, we've had 3 baptism services in 2019. We had 4 weddings. We had a kids' holiday club in August with 140 children participating in an African adventure. We've hosted inter-church events and hired the church out. The building is used by Gloucester City Mission for a Christian concert, by Believers in Recovery, a Christian drug and alcohol recovery support group for their national conference, and by Mariners Church to host a one-day conference. As you can see, this building that God has blessed us with is used relentlessly. And this has an impact for us, but more of that later. Other notable events last year include a group of 25 people from Kingfisher Tredworth going to Soul Survivor, the last Soul Survivor, which is a national youth event that was held in Peterborough. Pastor Ollie has been invited to, to run a weekly Bible study at Star College during the term time. And finally, our local congregation, we've sent out teams to work with Gloucester City Mission in serving food and hot drinks to the street homeless. And we also support the Gloucester Food Bank. That's here. Turning to Westgate, which is in the city centre, that has also continued to grow. It's reaching a growing number of people with drug-related issues and mental health challenges. There are now 40 people attending that service regularly. And these are the sort of people that would not normally be reached by more established churches. But through Westgate's church team, led by James and Jan and a small group of volunteers, their lives are beginning to change for the better. They receive hot food and drink, which is always good, but also a supported community and spiritual health. In 2019, we started a Connect group that meets midweek, and we've seen people grow together and in their relationship with God. All of that activity across the 2 churches and the impact that it has on our local community in Tredworth, into Gloucester City and beyond is delivered by volunteers and our small team of 3 full-time and 3 part-time staff, plus a part-time cleaner and a volunteer maintenance guy, Steve Evans, to look after the building. Our international family has continued to expand across the world. It's led by Senior Pastor James, wearing his other hat, or one of his other hats. The Kingfisher International family extending to Spain through the Fellowship of King Church, down to Africa in Malawi, Mozambique, and now Zimbabwe and Kenya, across to India, into the Philippines, and across to Macau in southern China. In 2019, James visited Malawi and the Philippines to assess the progress of our work in those countries. In Malawi, we held our first ever regional conference, where the teaching materials were gratefully taken away and put to good use. We've also supported 2 building projects in Malawi, the Church Training Centre in Limbe and a pastor's training college. In the Philippines, James reviewed the success of the Dumagat education program, which has been running for a few years now. This provides support for children to be able to attend a local elementary school. We've been able to fund 6 shelters to be built to house families, to ensure a safe and secure environment for the 36 children who attend the school. We've also supported another building project in a town called Pante in the north of the country, where a new church building is planned. In Spain, James visited to provide support to the Fellowship of the King Church, which is actually in transition as they are getting used to working with a new senior pastor. And finally, in India, new churches have been launched in Delhi and Punjab. 2020 will be a key area will be key for these churches in India, and it's one of the things that I know that James is looking at acting on in 2020. So, wow, that is a summary of what we have achieved in 2019. There are other things that could be included, but I haven't got the time. As I said earlier, I think we can too often take for granted just how God is using our little old church here in Gloucester. Now, all of this report, that report that I've just presented, will be included in the annual accounts. But now I'd like to turn to the financial part of the annual accounts. Now, I'm not going to bore you with numbers and accounting talk. Well, not much anyway. But there are some key aspects of the finances that are important for me to share. So, one of the key requirements of the trustees is to ensure that the charity manages its finances prudently. That means ensuring that we can account for all the money we receive and all the money we spend, and that our transactions are transparent. So in simple terms, that we don't break the law. Now, I happen to know that prison life would not suit me, so that's a great incentive for us to do that really well. Now, over the last 5 years, we've introduced and refined our management of money. Each year we forecast what income we expect and what our expenditure will be. We set budgets, we track how we're doing against our plan, we monitor our cash, and we forecast right to the end of the year our cash. All of this is managed by David Byrne as our Treasurer and Operations Manager. I'm going to leave the lid off. So one aspect of being a trustee that I've learned in the last 15 years is that normal business rules don't apply. So let me explain this. There have been times when we've looked at the year ahead, and if this was a normal business, then we'd be letting staff go, we'd be reducing expenditure, we'd be closing down ministries, we might even be closing down the building to save some of the bills. And things have really looked pretty bleak over my time as a trustee. But this isn't a normal business. As I've learned, this is God's business. So, as Jill said last week, we need to remember that God is God and we're not. So, in those tough times, we have prayed into the situation. We've trusted that God is with us. So, we do what we can and we trust that God will deliver. The problem is His, and the solution is also His. And we have to trust Him, but we still have to act in faith. So, God in action can be illustrated in the last 3 years' accounts. In 2017, we posted a deficit of £10,800, and that was following a drop in tithe giving. This ate away at a surplus that we'd actually made the previous year, and it couldn't be sustained into 2018. So as we entered 2018, we forecast a £17,000 deficit. So we needed to take action. Now, we could have taken the decision to stop the refurbishment plans, or we could have stopped our tithing out to conserve our cash. After all, that's what a normal business would do. You'd batten down the hatches. Instead, we held our promise to restore God's house and also honour God's blessing on us by tithing what we receive. We did take action. We undertook a full review of the staff hours and contracts and reduced hours where we could. We also tightened our ministry budgets and reviewed our expenditure on things like utilities, computing, printing, and we got better deals. As we undertook all of these actions and kept to our regeneration and tithe commitments, we received some unexpected donations from both inside the church and outside of the church. So by the end of that year, we actually had a small deficit of only £2,000, which is not only manageable, it's miraculous. Now, in 2019, we forecast another deficit, this time £14,000, mainly because tithe giving was static, but of course our costs still keep going up. At the end of 2019, we will show a small deficit of just over £2,700. Now, if you recall, I think last year I shared that It wasn't that our financial forecasts were wrong or flawed. It's that God has a forecast that we don't see. We get a sense of it through the vision he presents, and that vision is what we need to act on. As I said, we do our bit in faith, and we leave God to do his bit. So, what do we forecast 2020 to look like? Well, no surprise, but at the moment it looks like we're going to have a deficit. This time it could be as much as £17,000. Now, to put this in context, before you all panic, in the 10 years that I've been Chair of Trustees, I've never forecast a surplus. Gosh, that would be great. And yet, as I said last year, we're still here. We're still here. I'm still in the chair and we're still here. It's a holy mystery to me, but I'm not complaining. The actions we've taken already for this year include restructuring the international ministry funding. As I think it's James explained, if you've seen the video that was shown a couple of weeks ago, it's also on the website. The growth in that ministry meant that it had actually become too big to remain financially underwritten by Treadworth Church. So it's been released this year from the mothership to boldly go and pursue international ministry. On tithing out, we've actually firmed up our commitment by building in long-term support for they follow God's calling abroad. We've also set up a Treadworth Infant School Hardship Fund to provide support to needy families right on our doorstep. These are counterintuitive actions because I think we're short of money, but we're actually committing money going forward. But God has placed those things on our hearts, and we've acted as the Spirit has led us. So what is needed this year and going forward? There are some smaller things we need to consider, but also a major area that you need to be aware of. Now, my role as a trustee is on your behalf to ensure that the church administration operates in a way that meets all the legalities of this world. Yes, that means money management, amongst other things. But my role is not to protect you from being involved in our finances. I used to think it was, but actually that was a part of the burden in a bag that I carried around. So this is where your call to action, and I guess you knew that it would be coming at some stage. Let's start with the smaller things. But when I say smaller, I should warn you that I don't actually mean easier. So, you've already seen what we've achieved in 2019 with our small team of full-time and part-time staff. But one of the realities that we face is that in order to keep our costs down, we've had to maintain really tight controls on the payroll. In 2016, we gave the staff their first pay rise for 8 years. But since then, we've had to freeze the pay. Now, from April, we'll be awarding the part-time staff a pay rise because without one, regrettably, they would be on a wage below the national minimum wage. Now, we, the trustees, really want to review the full-time staff wages for next year, if we can. Now, I really value what our small team of staff do at this church. They do an amazing job, and they go well over and above the call of duty to provide for all of us in this church. So my question to the church is, how do you want us to treat our staff? I would love to reward them this side of heaven. But our financial constraints hamper what we can do. Now, tithe giving is at the heart of Kingfisher. As a godly principle, we encourage all to consider tithing. Now, I've spoken many times about tithing. And I've got to say, it doesn't get easier the more I do it. As a church, most of our income comes from tithes and regular donations. So here are a few facts and figures around what we receive in tithes. Since 2010, our tithe receipts have dropped from 124,000 to 90,000. And that's despite our congregation growing. In the last 3 years, tithe giving has pretty much remained static. But as I said, our costs continue to rise. At the moment, we have 65 people who tithe. That's less than a third of our adult congregation. When we look at the age profile of tithers, we see that 2 are under the age of 25 and 10 are in the 25 to 35 age group. So only a dozen people under the age of 35 tithe in this church. Yet, there are 46 tithers in the 55 plus age group, of which 8 are pensioners and 10, including me, are over the age of 60. Now this is relevant as many givers in this bracket are now approaching or have reached retirement age, and their tithe amount will drop as they retire. The tithe age profile does not match the congregation age profile. In fact, it's almost the opposite, which is not a healthy position. The truth is, if things stay as they are, they will have a significant impact on this church in the coming years. Now, if what I'm saying is uncomfortable for you to hear, then please act on the discomfort. Don't blame me. I'm only the messenger. If you consider Kingfisher to be your spiritual home, then ask, what can you give towards keeping this home running? That's a question between you and God. I'm not here to guilt you into giving, because tithing is an act of faith. It's not an act of obligation. In 2 Corinthians 9 it says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. If you feel convicted to act on this message, then go and speak to David Byrne about how you can start to tithe or donate regularly. Act on it without delay. Well, actually, wait till the end of the service. As a church, we have paid staff so that key areas of the church activity can be organised and delivered. But they can only do so much. And that's where we need volunteers to step up and fill the gap. It's easy to assume that because Sunday services happen relatively smoothly that we don't need your help. But the truth is, in many areas we are stretched, and the same core people seem to get involved in helping out. As Luke 10:12 says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So you could offer your time as a resource. Ask yourself, how can I chip in? Where might this be? Well, for a start, we only have 2 or possibly 3 Sunday stewards. We're down to even less, I don't know, on the rota, and they cover the morning and evening services. Can you offer to be here once a month to assist in ensuring that church is ready to receive all those people who come across our threshold? The more people who step up and chip in, actually, the less of a seemingly onerous task this will become. Is this you? If it is, speak to Ollie after the service. This church building is in constant use. We also need to get work parties together to clear up the car park perimeter, deep clean the church occasionally, and help with minor repair and make good projects. Steve Evans does a sterling job, but again, there's only one of him, and there's an awful lot to do. Could you help with this? Do you have DIY skills? Do you enjoy cleaning? Some of you must do. Basically, do you make a great brew and sarnies? It's as simple as that. Is this you? Then speak to David again at the end of the service, who also does make a great brew. Now, as we sit here in our well-lit and air-conditioned and mainly dry hall, I just want to reflect on the regeneration project, because God has truly blessed us with this building. But sometimes, I confess as a trustee, I can lose sight of the blessing and see only this as only being a burden. In 2016, we appealed to the church to dig deep and get together a fund to reinvigorate and invest in the fabric of this building. As a church, we raised just over £19,000. We managed to claim another £1,900 in gift aid. To this pot, through the incredible work of Katie Tucker, who is a volunteer and a trustee, she researched and prepared endless applications, and we gained access to over £43,000 in grants. Now, I believe this was God blessing our faith statement to start the project to restore God's house when we didn't know how we were going to do it, but we did it anyway. To our donations, God steered us to funds that made the whole project viable. In total, over the last 3.5 years, we've used that £64,500 to upgrade the areas of the building in 5 phases. I'm just going to quickly remind you, because again, we can easily forget how far we've come. Phase 1 was the external work. We had a new front door. You may have forgotten that we used to have a rubbishy old front door. We built an access ramp so we didn't have to lug people up steps. The exterior walls were painted. We got new signage. We repositioned the gate. More about that later. Phase 2, we moved to the interior. We converted the soft playroom area upstairs to become a multi-purpose meeting room. Unfortunately, we have a persistent problem with the leaking roofs, which meant that phase has kind of dragged on and still isn't complete. Phase 3, we stayed indoors. We painted the entrance, the corridor, the main hall. We installed CCTV so that we could get away from our expensive alarm system. Phase 4 saw us completely upgrade our heating. Hooray! It always had been a lash-up of storage heaters, hot air blowers, and even a large gas burner that used to blow your parting at the back of the building. We installed air conditioning in the main hall, 180 room, Little Fish's room, and upstairs. As a result, actually, our energy bills have been slashed because we now have a proper heating system, not a load of make-do solutions. Phase 5 was focused on the main hall and ran in parallel with Phase 4. We installed a new ceiling. We put new lights up. We redesigned the stage. We put up screens. All of the regeneration fund has now been used. I hope what I've just demonstrated is we've actually used it, but used it well. We've got an awful lot of bang for our buck. But let's not lose sight of how God has blessed us with this building, and then he blessed us again to help us restore it. However, as I mentioned earlier, the building is in constant use, and it's taken a toll. There remain areas that need repair or replacement or revisiting. In fact, although the whole, I've got to say, the whole from up here, the whole looks great. But, I mean, the further back you go in the building, I'm afraid the less great it looks. God's house needs further work on it, and some of the things are really major items. We've still got an ongoing roof leak. We think we've cured, but it still presents itself every now and again. We've got gutter leaks that really need a solution. We've taken a temporary refurbishment for the loos, but they actually need a major refit, especially the disabled loo, which is actually no longer up to spec. The kitchen has had temporary repairs, but the problem is that we need to have an industrial solution, not a domestic solution in there. The 180 room we've started, but we've kind of not finished it. The jungle room and Little Fish's rooms, well, when were they last done? I think it's 2006. It might even be longer than that. 2008. Go. That was the last time we did anything in those. They need refreshing. Once the roof leaks are sorted, we really need to move our office upstairs so that downstairs, the office, what was the office, can become an activity room with disabled access. Moving to the outside, we need to finish painting. We didn't actually finish it. And actually what we did paint now needs redoing. It's like the Forth Bridge, but it's what it is. I can't say anything more than that. The entrance gates were a temporary solution 3 years ago. It's a lash-up. We need to do something better for our security. And lastly, but by no means least, I'm afraid, you may have noticed, our car park, the tarmac, is deteriorating rapidly. And even just patching it is going to cost a lot of money. So we need to revisit our commitment to keep God's house in order. We need to put together another regen project. Now, this is separate to the regular tithing. We'll be looking at putting together a project plan in due course. There are plans for what needs to be done and how we might raise funds for the project. But the trustees cannot deliver this for you. It's a major call on our church. It needs the church to get involved. At the start of this year, Pastor Ollie delivered a sermon series called Going Strong. It was all about not just operating in survival mode. The challenge was, how will this look for us as a church? Well, I think the new regeneration project is part of this challenge to keep going strong. In Malachi 3, it says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. And see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Do we believe that promise? That's the challenge. Proverbs 26 says, "The man who is right with God gives all he can." So, what is the all that we can give to God's mission through Kingfisher Church? In James's vision talk, he talked about how we are called to go, make, baptize, teach. He described how we can get stuck at the go bit when we think we don't know enough or we don't have enough resources. We set our plans to be reasonable, doable, achievable, but it's based on our view of the goals and the timescales. But we need to seek God's perspective on that. James challenges us all to have a boldness to dare so that our little becomes his much, that our willingness becomes his opportunity. In looking to do something amazing, we don't need to know all the detail. We just need to know that God is God and we are not. James also asked us to no longer sit back and observe, no longer follow from a distance, but choose to get close to God's call and be all in. That means all in with our time, with our faith, I'm afraid with our money. Pastor Ollie has recently been delivering the Who Dares Win sermon series. It's about the willingness to step up, to keep moving forward. In light of the challenges that I've put to you this morning, how will you respond to become more involved in the Kingfisher journey? As I come to a close, I just ask you this. Can we dare to press into God, take steps of faith, and press on with what he's called us to do, and keep on going? Can I invite Ollie to pray for us?